As you can see, these things get really dirty. We just finished leaf season over here, and you know, with all the leaves, the dust, and all that stuff, you can see how dirty it gets. I'll clean all this off before I assemble it all back together. But here's your spark plug. Your valves are under here, so we actually have to take off this cover here as well. Here's your carburetor, here's your primer bulb, and to get to all that, we need to remove the air filter cover. So again, here's the air filter. See how dirty that is? Alright, so the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to remove this bolt and this bolt down here, and that'll take off the cover so we can access the valves. Oh yeah, before we take off this cover, we actually, I forget what this is called, man, I just drew a blank. Whatever it's called. Anyway, we got to remove these two plugs here, and they just pop right off. Sometimes they're hard, but I actually just get the tool and then I pop it up. The coil, that's what it's called. So we remove the two prongs. It's this one used to have a cover on it. I honestly don't know what happened to it. I probably should put some tape or something over it so it doesn't short out. But they come off usually pretty easy. You just pop them right off. And the cover will come right off. Look at all that dirt. Up before I start disassembling everything that you see. So give me a few minutes here. I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to clean it all up, and then I'll come back and get started. Alright, so got the majority of that blown or cleaned off, I'm sorry. As you can see, there's no more dirt, no more debris up in there. I cleaned it all off real good. There's still some here down here on the tank and on the air filter housing, but all that'll get cleaned off once I take everything off. So now that I got all that cleaned off, I can start taking some more parts off. So the next thing I'm going to take off is the air filter housing and the carburetor. And to do that, let me make a little bit of room over here. When you take off your air filter housing, you'll have a screw here and one there, and that'll actually remove your housing and your carburetor. So let me take those off. And two. And now you can separate the housing from the carburetor here. So you got fuel lines that are, let me get a close-up of this. You have fuel lines that come into the carburetor from the primer bulb here, and let me just pop this off, or let me see if I can do this with one hand real quick. So you got a breather hose here, that's what I just popped off from back there, and then this carburetor is actually kind of stuck on there. There we go. So you got your fuel line from the primer bulb trying to do this with one hand. Here, that goes, oops, back here, right there. Then you got one that comes from the tank down here, oops, down here, and goes down back in there to the tank. You have to take off your throttle cable too, which is actually right here. Let me put it back on so you can see. It's there on the back end of it. It comes off real easy. You just slide it up and pull it out. After that, what I have found, especially in the summertime when I'm doing this, you need to vent your tank. Otherwise, when you pull the fuel lines off the carburetor, it's going to start spitting fuel everywhere. So let me open the tank, or just crack it anyway, and then I can take off the rest of the fuel lines. Let me put the camera down. And we can pull off the rest of these fuel lines. Your carburetor. So like I said, typically, now that I put a new one, the next time I service this piece of equipment, I'm going to do a rebuild, and I'll do a video on that. And as you can see here, spark plug, and we'll do the valves. Here in a minute, again, I'm going to pause the video because I'm going to take everything off of this, and I'm going to clean all this before I put it back on, and I'll show you how you replace the primer bulb. So, but since I have everything here, let's adjust the valves right away. I'm not going to use my drill since I got this right here. Let's take the valve cover off. So you need to take out your spark plug because we're going to have to find top dead center on here to adjust the valves. I always leave the spark plug in there because even though I clean this area, I don't know what's up under the valve cover here. There may be a little bit more debris that I don't see, and I don't want it to fall inside the motor. So once I take off the cover, then if I determine it's clean, then I'll take off the spark plug and we'll go from there. Never mind, I'm using the drill. So valve cover just pops right off. There's a gasket in there. I replace it every other time. Again, I already replaced it, so I'm not. It's still in good condition. I don't see any cracks or anything like that on it. And now we got our valves. I don't know if they're adjusted yet because I still got to find top dead center. Once we do that, then we'll determine with the feeler gauge if it's top dead center. So let's go ahead and take off the spark plug. And since I have it right here, I'm just going to use the tool. It's got the spark plug end here. There's no dirt or anything up there. So here's the old spark plug, which is now trash. And now we need to find top dead center so that we can adjust our valves. The easiest way to do that, here on the starter here, get a screwdriver. I usually just turn it a couple times anyway. You can see your valves open and close. I know some guys that they can do it actually without doing this, taking this off and sticking a screwdriver in there to find top dead center because they're that good. But even though I've been doing this a long time, I still use the screwdriver method. So your valves go up and down. Once you see them both, for instance, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is your exhaust. Well, at least the way it was explained to me was the valve that's on the side of the exhaust, that's your exhaust valve, and the side that has it where the carburetor's at, that's your intake. Again, I could be wrong. I don't know. That's what was told to me, so that's what I've always gone by. So again, You see your valves move freely, or not freely, but you see them go up and down. This one already did. Your exhaust, your intake. So after they do that, you drop a screwdriver in there or whatever you want to put in there, as long as it's clean. And as you turn it, you can see the screwdriver coming up. And right there, let me just double check. Yep, it's coming up, and right there is top dead center. If I go back, it goes down. If I go past, it's going to start going down again. There it is. So we're going to back up to where I can turn the starter here. There's a name for this. I think it's the flywheel. And it's not doing nothing. So right there should be top dead center. So after we get that, we'll grab our feeler gauges. Now I got the Stihl feeler gauges. It came with the kit. There's 3 of them here that it came with. It says 10 on there. I think it's, I don't know, it's 0.1, I don't know, 1,000th of an inch or something like that. I don't know. It's whatever this is. It says, let's see if we could get that on there. Yeah, I have to put my hand. It has a 10 on there. Again, I don't know exactly what I could find out and get the actual what do you call it, the valve lash. I have the number. I have the manual for these, so I could get the number if you're interested. If you want, ask in the comment and I will get it for you. So it's top dead center. We're going to get our feeler gauge. Let me grab the camera so you can see what I'm doing. So as you see here, we're going to slide it in here. This one's, again, I think this is the exhaust. It's pretty loose. Needs to be adjusted. And the intake here, this one's a lot looser. Wow. So yes, they both need to be adjusted. So the way you adjust that is, let me put this down for a second. Socket, ratchet, and being that this one is too loose, you're going to get your feeler gauge. You're going to slide it into the gap here, and in very, very small increments, you tighten or loosen. If it's too tight, you'll loosen, but in this case, we need to tighten. So this one is pretty snug. I'll show you in a second. And we got this one snug as well. Here's the feeler gauge. Here's the little port that you put the feeler in. And good. And good. Again, if they were too tight, you would loosen them. If they were like these ones too loose, you would tighten them. So after you do that, I usually turn this a few times. And now we need to find top dead center again. Alright, we got top dead center. And we're going to check the valve lash again. We're still good. And we're still good. So that is setting your valves on the BR600. So now we'll put a spark plug on there. Again, I got the kit here. Typically I would buy everything separate, but I saw this when I was at the dealer and I said, oh, that's pretty cool, I'll just get that. Probably actually more expensive doing it this way. I didn't price anything out. Excuse me, price anything out, but I don't know, we'll see. I forgot what I paid for that. So per the dealer, Stihl pre-gaps their spark plugs before they put them in the kit. And just like anything else, any other spark plug, you don't need to crank it down. Snug it real good. Again, you don't want to break that off in the head there, and then you'll be screwed. Cleaned up. Now we're going to change the primer bulb with Stihl on the. I can't speak for all the blowers because I've only had the 600s. I had 550s way back in the day, probably I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. Back then, I wasn't really servicing my own equipment, so I don't know about a lot of this stuff on those. But I do know on the 600s, there's different primer bulbs. There's two different colors. There's a white and a black. So if you ever have to replace your primer bulb, you actually need to look at them, look at the one that you have on there, and see which one you have. So to replace it, just get your screwdriver. It's got two prongs. There's one there and there's one on top. You just pry them out. See if I can do this without cutting myself. So there's the top one, and there you go. Just push it out and it comes out. On the actual primer bulb, there's two different size of the barb fittings, I guess you can. Yeah, the fitting that goes into the primer where the fuel lines go in. Be sure to put your hose on the right one. So as you can see, the hose that goes to the carburetor, the fuel line, not hose, but fuel line, is on the smaller one. So we're gonna, when I pull this off, be sure to put it back on the right one, otherwise it ain't gonna work. So the fuel line was on the shorter of the two fittings. So you get your new one, just pop it back on there, and there you go. Putting it back on, just slide it through. And then just when you push it in, it'll clip. And there you go. Oh, look at that. It broke. Well, the clip just broke off this brand new primer bulb. Let me grab another one. We can put our carburetor on. Back on the machine. Again, you got to remember what goes where. I'm going to start with the air filter housing here. So like I said, you need to remember where your fuel lines go. This is the one that goes to the primer bulb. There's a little slot that it slides into. And then just push it on, put your fuel line on, and then we can put the carburetor. Where did I put it? Oh. So, carburetor sits here. So again, here's your primer bulb primer bulb line. That goes on this top piece. Just slides right in. Then you got your other fuel line, that comes from the tank to your carburetor, right here, slides right on. And then what I usually do is at this step here, I put my fuel lines. There's slots where they go. then you got your throttle cable, which goes here in this on the carburetor here in this slot. Just get the thin end and then slide it down, and there you go. Again, there's slots for your throttle cable. Put them in there, or put your cable in there. And now we can put the housing with the carburetor on there. Be sure to put your breather hose. And that's that. There you go. There's the complete setup right there. Now we can put the cover that for the that covers the valve cover here. Be sure when you put this cover, you pull this back. Otherwise, it's going to go through there, and you'll have a hell of a time putting the main cover back on. That sits like so. You can see I already cleaned it up. Got your two connections for your, I just forgot what it's called again. Whatever it's called. Slide them back in the slots where they were. Connect them. Make sure everything lines up. And now we can put our screws back in. Before, when I use the drill to put the screws back on, I don't tighten them all the way. I finish tightening them with the actual scrunch, just because I don't want to strip them out. Again, you just snug them down. Leave that off for now, the spark plug boot. And now, let me make some room right here. We are going to do the fuel filter, or fuel filters. Actually, you know what? We need to put the screws in the carburetor. Let me turn this so you can see. So again, we need to put the 2 bolts back for the carb. This is where it gets a little tricky because you gotta line them up. You gotta line them up back here, and obviously you can't see. Sometimes you're lucky and you get it on the first try. And there's that one. And I got lucky. This bottom one can be a real pain sometimes. Sometimes you got to reach back here, and where the carb attaches to, I don't know what it's called, but the piece that it attaches to back here, you got to move it around with your hand until you get that hole lined up. Alright, well, since I got it here, let's go ahead and do the fuel filters. So the fuel filter, there is 2 fuel filters in here. Let's see if I can get a good... Can't really see it. Just trust me on it. There's 2 fuel filters in there. When I pull them out here in a second, you'll see. So to get them out sometimes can be very tricky. If you have a piece of wire, that actually is the easiest way. If you get a piece of wire and hook the end of it, you can actually pull in there and pull them out. But I don't know what I did with mine. I have more wire, but I'm not going to go get it. Let's just use some needle nose. You can do it with needle nose pliers. It just takes a little longer. Make sure that they're clean before you put them in. And I know mine were clean because I checked them. Alright, so there's the fuel filter. One of them. So on there, the one I actually have here in my hand is this one here that has the double, I think it's called a pickup. I could be wrong, but I think it's called a pickup. So the reason they use this is so that basically you have a fuel filter on both sides of the tank. So if you're leaning and using the blower, and if the fuel's on one side, whichever filter is on, for instance, this side towards us, it'll still pick up the fuel, versus if there was only the one filter and it was on the other side, obviously you're going to run out of fuel. So now you got two in there to avoid that. So okay, here's the pickup. We'll call it a pickup. I could be wrong on the name. And here's the other filter. So you're going to pull it, and attached to that is the other filter. I personally just change this one right away. Just pull it off. Put the new one. This one can be a little tricky because that fuel line that's attached to it is very short. So when you pop it off, if it pops back into the tank, it is a pain in the butt to get back out so you can connect your filter on there. I've done it, trust me. So what I do, I hold this with one hand, I pop off this short fuel line, I connect it to this to the new one right away, so that when I pop this one off, I just got to connect it real quick so that it doesn't pop back in. Pop it off. Attach your new one. This short piece that you see here is the one that goes on the opposite side of this fuel filter here. So you just tuck it back in there. And I actually pull back on it a little bit like a rubber band, and then pop. Well, that didn't work too well. Usually it just pops back in there, and they're both in there, and we're good to go. This tank has a little bit of debris in there. I think next service I'm actually going to take off the tank and clean it out. Put your cover back. There's your fuel filters. Since we have it here, let's go ahead and put our air filter. You know what? I'm actually going to wait on this. Let me show you something real quick. So right here, this is where your spark arrestor is. And let me tell you something real quick. I had a problem with one of my blowers one time. It would not start, it would not run, nothing. Everything I just did here, I did on that blower, and it still wouldn't start. What happened was the screen on the spark arrestor got caked, and it wasn't allowing the exhaust to blow out. So now, when I'm working on these, I actually take it off and clean it off. All it is, you have a screw. This is the muffler. You have a screw here and a screw here. Take off those two screws, and this piece here will slide out. Let me take that off and I'll show you. Let me loosen them, and then I will show you how it comes off. So I'm just using a regular flathead. Alright, so got both screws off. Like I said, this just slides off. And this one's actually starting to get dirty. See how dirty that's starting to get? All we have to do, let me put this camera down. So that screen that you see there, if it gets plugged up, your machine ain't gonna run. So all you do is you pop it out, and then this one's, it's dirty, but it's not bad. Just clean up. Be sure to clean off your spark arrestor screen and the inside of this housing thing. I'm gonna clean this off real quick, and I'll be right back. All right, so we got our spark arrestor screen all cleaned up now. I don't know if you can tell there. You can see a difference. Here's the cover to it. Clean that out as well. And now we just put it back on. Again, it just slides in like so. Slide it back on the muffler. And we'll put our 2 screws. Done. And that's pretty much everything. Now we just need to put the cover back on. I'll put the air filter here in a second. Once I get the main cover, once we get that on, we'll put the air filter. Again, putting the main cover back on, push the spark plug boot through. Go ahead and connect your spark plug boot on the spark plug. Oops. Uh-oh. That one I didn't see where it went. Give me a second. Where did it? Oh, there it is. Let's put the starter back on. Same thing here. You don't need to crank down on these bolt screws. And that's there. That's that. So like I said, I put them in there. I don't tighten them all the way with the drill. I snug them. I make sure that they're nice and snug, not overly tightened, so I don't strip anything. All right, we're good there. And last thing, our air filter. Air filter cover. And there you go. That is the tune-up of the BR600, the Stihl BR600 Magnum. Now, obviously, before you start it, I'm going to have to primer it. Occasionally, you may have to do some fine-tuning on the carburetor. I have found, I usually don't, but I hear a lot of people, or not a lot, but I've heard of guys that do have to fine-tune them. But I will start it here in a minute, make sure everything runs good. And like I said, I may have to fine tune it, I may not. We'll see. Questions, comments, leave them down in the comment section. Thank you for watching.